Apophis is one of the gods of the netherworld and represents the evil serpent that faces God Ra in his journey and faces the deceased too, and thus he should be terminated. Usually, he appears with the arrow of the deceased sunk into his neck. About naming the snake Apophis or Apobis, it's a Greek name, taking after the Egyptian name Abeb, and the name is derived from the verb api, which is a verb that appears since the Pyramids texts and gives the meaning of to penetrate or to fly or to cross. According to what came in the different religious texts, the snake Apophis existed since eternity, since the beginning of the creation of the world, for he represents the evilness and the unbalance of the universe. His defeat and expel for the first time was by the Creator God in his various images. Therefore, he became the most vicious enemy of the sun god and intersects and opposes his daily journey in the sky. Accordingly, he was described in the texts as it's a reflection of his being destroyed and terminated every day. He's an older image of Satan who was expelled from heaven by God and revenged by trying to harm and destroy humans. Abeb or Apophis is the embodiment of the hostile forces that stalk the sun god and the journey of his boat in the sky of the netherworld. Apophis the snake attacks the bark of Ra and therefore threatens the world's order in general. The crew of the boat of the sun god, who are headed by God Set, defeats this attacker after fighting him, having victory over him. This struggle is repeated in the daily journey of the sun. According to the ancient Egyptian texts, the snake Apophis existed since eternity, since the beginning of the creation of the universe. He represents evilness and the unbalance of the universe. His defeat was inevitable, and he was expelled by the god in his various images. Therefore, he became the most vicious enemy of the sun god, and he ambushed his daily journey. In the texts, he was described as the terminated, as a description of his being defeated and finished daily. In a text from the tomb of Nakht of the 18th dynasty in the west bank of Luxor, there is a call addressed to God Ra, the sun god, in his journey. It says, "Cross the horizon, and may your heart be merry, and you become safe. For the serpent Sebi, which is a name of description of the snake Apophis, has fallen. His hands are tied and cut by the knife which he had prepared." The oldest reference of serpent Apophis goes back to the first intermediate period and came in a text in the tomb of the ruler Ankhtifi, and he appeared clearly in the texts of the coffins in the period of the Middle Kingdom as an enemy of the sun god and an attacker of his daily bark. It was a segment number 414 from the coffins texts that was headed by the name "The Expel of Apophis from the Sun Boat," and it talked about pushing away the evilness of Apophis. The text says, "This is a spell to push the serpent Abeb away from the bark of Ra. Look, the flame came out of the sky and entered into the cave of Sebi the rebellious. He will rebel against Ra and remove the flames of fire. He will be severely restrained by the gods. God Ra, you will be protected." In the New Kingdom books of the Netherworld, Apophis appeared with different names, especially in the Book of the Dead and the Imidwat. Meket is a goddess of El Shalal, or the waterfall area. She was connected to the triad of Elephantine, which is composed of Khnum, Satet, and Anukit. Her oldest manifestation goes back to the Middle Kingdom period and until the age of the 22nd dynasty, for her name came on some reliefs in Elephantine temples. Her name was written in simple forms on a statue in Berlin and over Sohail Stela and Buhen Temple and the Temple of Amaziz II in Elephantine. The name is derived from the verb meket or meki, which means to protect. Meket took the form of a lady sitting on the throne, wearing a tight dress and holding the scepter. Sometimes she appears standing with the tight dress without the headdress, except from the dry wig. Meket appeared on some monuments and scenes in relation that joined between her and the triad of Elephantine. For in a text relieved on a statue in Berlin from the 13th dynasty, she was mentioned with the triad of Elephantine in the offering formula. There is another relief in the temple of Hekaib in Elephantine Island and the stela of Thutmose III in Sohail Island and a chapel of King Horemheb and other reliefs. She was pictured 2 times in Buhen Temple, south of Helfa Valley, that was on the western wall, with one of the queens, most probably Queen Hatshepsut. In the second scene, she appears with King Thutmose II on the northern wall of the south chamber, where he offers her the Ankh symbol. The text says, "An offering of Shebet to Meket, may she be given life." Meket bore several titles, including the Lady of the Sky, the Lady of the House of Gold, the Mistress of the Great House, and the one who dwells in Elephantine. Anukit is the local goddess of Sohail Island and the 3rd member in the triad of Elephantine. She is one of the 2 wives of god Khnum, as she has formed with both of Khnum and Satet the sacred triad of Elephantine Island since the beginning of the New Kingdom. There are different opinions about the status of Anukit in the triad, for some saw that she represents the role of the daughter, while others saw that she is the 2nd wife of god Khnum. She was known as the goddess of the flood and the Nile water, and her name was derived from the verb enket, which means to surround or to include. It is thought that she is a goddess from Nubia, and her name came in the Egyptian sources since the Middle Kingdom, for she was mentioned on a stela from the first cataract with the gods of the cataract. Anukit was pictured as a female whose head is adorned with a bunch of feathers. The gazelle is a sacred animal of that goddess, for whom a temple was built in Sohail and in Philae and in Qom Morra. She was entitled as Anukit, the Lady of Sohail. The island of Sohail is located in the first cataract of Aswan and is famous for its stones that are all carved with reliefs of the triad of Elephantine. These reliefs were marks left by travelers and tradesmen of the past who commemorated their stopping by the island on their way to Nubia, together with pharaohs who wrote their names with prayers to the triad of Elephantine. Today, Sohail Island, which is famous by the stela of starvation, is an attraction to tourists who like to enjoy sailing in the beautiful Nile of Aswan and getting to know the gods and goddesses who once ruled Elephantine. God Khenti Ementio's name means the Lord of the Westerns, who are the dead. He is the oldest deity in Abydos and merged with God Osiris. He appears in more than one form, including the human form of God Osiris. This name became an adjective to both Osiris and Anubis, who were both deities of the dead and the cemetery. Osiris dominated the characteristics and the role of God Khenti Ementio, the old god, completely, and became the sole god of the dead. These gods are to be found, especially in the tombs, playing their sacred role in the nether world, or the world of the dead. The best example of that are the tombs of the Valley of the Kings on the west bank of Luxor. There, we can see a combination of gods who all play important roles with the deceased, each in his area. There are also figures of gods that combine more than one god in them, like god Betah Soker Osiris. This one god in shape includes the figure of god Soker, who is a falcon god worshipped in Memphis and connected with the cemetery, and became the god of the cemetery of Memphis, which is Saqqara, that has got its name from this god. Amongst his best examples is what's found in the silver sarcophagus of King Shishong II from Tanis. God Anubis got the title of the Lord of the Westerns, who are the dead, buried in the tombs of the West, which is one of Osiris' titles, and also God Khenti Ementio. Adjoining several gods playing similar or the same role in the ancient Egyptian religion was quite normal, especially when the old original gods fade away due to the falling of their cities where they were glorified and worshipped. More powerful gods took over depending on the power of their cities, but they were never forgotten. They were merged with the newer gods and remembered as well for eternity. There were 7 prophecies in the ancient world, but the Oracle of Ammon in Siwa maintained a great famosity that spread all over the Mediterranean countries, starting from the 26th dynasty, and its answers were received with great trust and respect. The temples of Ammon were built all around the Greek cities. Even in Athens, a temple consecrated for Ammon was inaugurated in 333 BC, less than 2 years before Alexander's visit to the Oracle Temple in Siwa. Alexander knew all these facts and the tales that talk about his direct relation with Ammon and his divine birth. No one knows what happened in the sanctuary of Ammon, or what were Alexander's questions and their answers. But it's a fact that, after that day, Alexander became a devoted believer in God Ammon and was proud to consider himself his son. Throughout the 8 years left in his life, and as he continued his conquests in Asia, he kept sending messengers with gifts to Siwa priests. When his best friend Hephaestion died, Alexander sent to Siwa to ask the oracle if he can be lifted to the level of gods. But the answer came, declaring him to be just a hero. As a sign of his great loyalty to Ammon in Siwa, Alexander ordered before his death one of his close friends, Arrhidaeus, to bury him close to his father Ammon in Siwa. A great funerary procession walked from Babylon to Egypt. Ptolemy I met it on its way in Palestine and accompanied it till Memphis, where Ptolemy insisted on burying Alexander in Alexandria in Egypt, and sent a memorial to the priests of Ammon instead. Alexander's golden sarcophagus was visited in Alexandria by Roman kings and travelers until Leo Africanus in the 15th century. But the tomb's location was buried and lost after that, and wasn't found till today. Nephthys is one of the most famous goddesses in ancient Egypt, as she was known as a sister to both Osiris and Isis in the Ennead of Heliopolis. She is one of the 4 protective goddesses and has played the role of the sister to goddess Isis and the protective to god Osiris and the deceased in several reliefs and religious scenes across the different ancient Egyptian eras. The oldest appearance of the name of this goddess goes back to the Pyramids texts, as she was mentioned as a member of the Ennead of Heliopolis. The name of this deity is read as Nebet-Het and was written in several ways, as it was written in 2 syllables or was written with the symbol of Neb within the sign of Hut. There were several opinions about the explanation of the meaning of the name, in spite of the clarity of its syllabus, for some translated the name to be the Lady of the Body, meaning the body of the gods. T. Velde sees the interpretation of the name to be the Lady of the House or the Palace, meaning the temple. There are no affirmed evidences on the appearance of this goddess before the 5th dynasty, and that through mentioning her in the Pyramids texts as one of the members of Heliopolis Ennead. Some opinions believe that both the names of Isis and Nephthys were job titles of the mourners connected with the mummification operation of Osiris, and that reflects one of the most important roles of Isis and Nephthys in protecting Osiris and mourning him after being killed by his brother Set. Both titles became 2 names of the 2 goddesses. The proof of that is the cult of these 2 goddesses was coherent to the evolving of Osiris' creed since the first moment.